This is the president of the Toronto Police Association. Wake up!
Prime Minister's hand-picked directors are under criminal investigation.
Every single day here in Canada, it's just something else. Welcome back to Moose on the Loose. My name's David, and today's top stories, we've got multiple clips from the Friday session here in the House of Commons. There's a lot of spicy action going on. Despite it being a Friday, it's usually a lot more chilled out. But we've got Larry Brock absolutely going off on the justice system. We've got multiple Conservatives bringing up corruption and just unloading on the Liberals, with the headline topic of being the SDTC, the Sustainable Development Technology Canada scandal, which is, it's going to be the thing that takes down Justin Trudeau on all his Liberals. They are refusing to give those documents, even though it was commanded to them by the House. The House represents the people, which has the ultimate authority in Canada. So if something is commanded by the Speaker in the House, then it must be done. And Justin Trudeau and the Liberals are refusing to give those documents, likely because it proves they're guilty. I mean, there's already hundreds of conflicts of interest and cases of fraudulent use of our tax dollars in there. They don't want to give those documents up, even to the point now where we have Elizabeth May. In this episode, you'll see her. She completely exposes Justin Trudeau's green agenda and how it's a scam. So let's jump into this.
Breaking news. The RCMP commissioner confirmed that the Prime Minister's hand-picked directors to the Green Slush Fund are under criminal investigation. So what we have now is the Liberals not only defying an order of this House to produce the documents and turn them over to the RCMP, Liberals are now obstructing justice by refusing to cooperate with the RCMP investigation. 9 Green Slush Fund appointees have been implicated in funneling $400 million to their own companies. Are Liberals obstructing justice so their cronies can avoid jail?
Here it is. They're finally getting criminally investigated. We all knew this was coming. It'll probably take a couple weeks before the hammer really drops on them.
I am disappointed in the Conservative Party's approach, and I'm not alone. If you take a look in terms of what it is that the Auditor General of Canada is saying and the RCMP is saying in regards to the Conservative tactic, and people should really note this, they are extremely uncomfortable. You have caused a great deal of discomfort to those independent offices because of your behavior here on the floor of the House of Commons.
The honourable member to speak through the chair.
That's unbelievable to say it's causing discomfort to the RCMP or the Auditor General. The one who's really feeling discomfort is the Liberals, because they got caught and they know that the cops are close, the evidence is there, and they're done.
This House is listening to the RCMP when the RCMP commissioner said yesterday that he's investigating the corruption at the Green Slush Fund. You know, they use as an excuse the Charter. The Charter does not exist to protect Liberals and prevent and create obstruction of justice opportunities. As Liberals cling to dear life to the secret documents, they obstruct justice. Hundreds of millions of dollars have already been funneled to Liberal cronies. What's the true number? Is it billions? Is it 2 billion? Will the Liberal who is obstructing justice and knows the true amount of
the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, instead of the Conservative Party playing games at a great expense to Canadians, solely focused on their party fortunes and anything else, as opposed to trying to do filibusters on the floor of the House of Commons, why don't they listen? Listen to what the RCMP, listen to what the Auditor General is saying, Madam Speaker. And what they are saying is this Conservative tactic causes great concern, and it's justified as the Conservatives are trying to blur the whole issue of judicial independence. Shame on them.
The Honourable Member.
He has the audacity to say playing games. This is our tax dollars and they're running us into the ground. These Liberals are absolutely frightened and scared because they know they're all connected to this and there's going to be a big jail waiting for all these schmucks.
The member made reference to the Charter of Rights. You know, yesterday I heard Conservative member say that parliamentarians should have the right to put people in jail, Madam Speaker. They have no credibility when it comes to the issue of the Charter of Rights. And
oh, come on, you guys broke the Charter of Rights. You seized people's bank accounts, locked them up, trample Canadians with horses. Get out of here. Next up, Stephen Guilbeault gets absolutely slaughtered on what happened with Jasper.
The Minister of the Environment ignored the science, and as a result, Jasper burned. The proof? His own executives were caught discussing cancelling prescribed burns for political optic reasons. Yet prescribed burns are an essential tool for preventing wildfires. Will this minister accept responsibility for his failure and apologize to the 2,000 residents of Jasper who have lost their homes and their businesses?
what the member opposite just said is simply not true. And if I wasn't in this House, I would probably be using another word. There's been 15 prescribed burns in the last 10 years, Madam Speaker, and the email he's referring to, our Parks Canada employee, discussing whether or not to use mechanical removals or prescribed burns. What he's saying is absolutely false, and he should be ashamed, Madam Speaker.
We all know you're at fault, Guilbeault. You just stand up like a man and just accept it for once. Why don't you Liberals accept that you just screwed up? And in this case, it cost people their houses and their jobs, their businesses.
Madam Speaker, the Minister of Environment claims to be proud of his preparations for the catastrophic Jasper wildfire, yet 1/3 of Jasper was destroyed. $1 billion in damages. 2,000 people homeless. It can hardly be described as a success. Everyone knew Jasper was a tinderbox. My former colleague Jim McGlinskey even tried to warn the government in this House as far back as 2016, yet not enough was done to protect the town of Jasper. How many more parks need to burn down before this minister is replaced by somebody who knows how fire works?
What's funny about this is Guilbeault's got nothing. He's an environmental activist. He's in that position, pretending he knows what he talks about, where you've got Blaine Calkins here, Conservatives, who was quite literally a park ranger. There's not even, this is what I always say, like, the people in these positions should have some sort of background that supports them in that job. They should know about, in this case, wildfires in Jasper. Guilbeault knows nothing, and he's getting humiliated here from Blaine about it, and there's nothing he can do about it.
Talk about what we're doing on this side and what they did when they were in power. The last year that this party was in power, $2 million to fight forest fires with Parks Canada. What we've done in the last few years, $85 million to help fight forest fires, to give means to our forest firing force.
Where did that actually go? Jasper burned down. It's results, Guilbeault. You guys just funnel that into your bureaucrats' pockets. What is it, consulting from McKinsey on how to stop forest fires? Let me guess. They wasted it on stupid crap like that.
Parks Canada to work with the Alberta government, to work with the city of Jasper. $2 million on their side, $85 million on our side, Madam Speaker.
Yeah, Jasper didn't burn down, though, when Harper was in power. So next up, we got Larry Brock, who just absolutely goes off on the justice system here and the Liberals.
Almost everyone they arrest is out on bail. No one stays in jail where they belong. And they laugh. This is the president of the Toronto Police Association. Wake up. Every day, Canadians are waking up to more news of shootings and murders. The minister bragged that his bail reform bill would make our streets safer. But the truth is, more criminals are out on bail, and Canadians are more frightened than ever. This bill is a complete failure. How many more lost lives is it going to take for the government to finally embrace jail, not bail, for serious violence?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Once again, he's pointing in the wrong direction.
Right.
There are justices of the peace every day in the province of Ontario who are releasing people on bail because of the inhumane conditions.
Can I interrupt the honourable member? I had a question.
I'm sorry, inhumane conditions? If someone like the guy, the cultural enricher that just shot a Toronto police officer in the chest, doesn't like his cell, tough luck. How about we get him a suit and get him down the sewers, cleaning that crap out where he belongs?
Order! From the top.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I gotta say, she commands more respect than Fergus, that's for sure.
Every single day in the province of Ontario, there are justices of the peace who are appointed by the provincial government, who are letting people out on bail because the conditions inside provincially built, provincially funded, and provincially operated prisons are inhumane and not okay for people, even prisoners, to be in. There is judicial decisions by justices of the peace who have considered this fact regularly, and they said until those conditions change, that's going to be a major consideration when they're listening to bail applications.
That's disgusting and disgraceful. I'm sorry, but it doesn't matter how humane the conditions are. It's not like we're living in Somalia. These Liberals, day after day, they have a couple clips just recently here I've shown where they prioritize the criminals causing the harm over our citizens and our cops. Like, what is wrong with these people? These are a bunch of traitors. Next up, we've got Elizabeth May completely crapping on Justin Trudeau's green policies and saying that they basically don't work.
Projects in our sample, the projected reduction of greenhouse gas emissions were, on average, half of what was presented at the time the project proposals were assessed. And my honourable colleague said, well, what could be the reason they're shoveling money out the door for projects that don't work? It must be to get money into the hands of the people they want to have the money. I would posit a much more likely explanation, which is the government has put forward a plan to achieve greenhouse gas reductions, which depends on achieving magical results from unproven technologies. So we've seen a big increase in the amount of money that goes to carbon capture, utilization and storage, despite the fact that all around the world it's been shown not to work, and the projects within Canada haven't achieved the demonstrated promised results. That's clear here.
This is coming from the Green Party leader. This is unbelievable. She just completely crapped on Trudeau's whole policy, the backbone of the Liberals' platform, and said it's not working. She's reading off some documents here that's coming from the SDTC, the whole scandal thing there, but that's the program she's talking about here. But she continues here.
We know that there was a lot of difficulty with conflict of interest. In fact, the way in which the board was being run was rife with conflict of interest. And that's a terrible shame, because this was an operation, as I've said previously in this place, that over decades had worked in assisting emerging technology companies, emerging technologies that have trouble getting seed funding through commercial banks and so on. It's very hard to get investment capital for something that is innovative, unproven, and not an article of faith of the government of the day that we have to shovel money at it whether it works or not. In other words, Sustainable Development Technology Canada had done much good work. The chair of the board changed after the 2017 report that found no conflict of interest problems. And I always feel...
Let's just make that clear. After 2017. So the previous couple of governments, however long it was running, it was fine. Harper's government before then. And after Trudeau gets into power, 2 years in, they switch it up. They completely stack the deck with Trudeau corrupted Liberals. And that's where all of this corruption started.
Awkward about using the name of a private citizen in this place, but she's had to resign as chair of the SDTC board. Annette Vercheron had private interests and continued involvement in companies that received SDTC funding.
She's funneled millions of dollars into her own companies. So I'm glad she at least mentioned her name on here.
This violated the conflict of interest guidelines of the organization. It violates basic conflict of interest guidelines. I don't know about the rest of my colleagues here in this place, but when I was first elected and read the ethics code, and I thought to myself, do they really need to write this down? I mean, don't people know this? It said no member of parliament should hire a family member in their office. That would be a conflict of interest. And I remember thinking, who do they think we are? Like, you don't have to write this stuff down. Well, apparently you do. And you can't be chair of a board and forget that you can't distribute money to yourself when you're on that board.
That's exactly what Annette Vercheron did. And I can only imagine she's at the top of the list for criminal investigation for the RCMP. Now, the RCMP are investigating some other stuff going on here, including foreign interference.
RCMP is receiving documents whether you want them or not.
He said the RCMP are receiving documents whether you want them or not.
From the House of Commons.
From the House of Commons.
Can you tell me a bit more? Are you afraid that this is the House of Commons interfering in police work and trying to direct the police with these documents?
I'm not going to comment on that, and other than the fact that we did receive the documents. And
let's just look at his reaction again as soon as he got that question.
Trying to direct the police with these documents?
There's a long breath there. A lot of looking around. There is something going on there, and he knows he's looking for the words of like, what can I talk about? Because there's a lot going on. If there wasn't anything going on, he would have just, snapped out that answer, and he would have answered right away. So there's a lot going on, and they're probably flooded with, oh my God, look how bad the corruption is here in the Liberal government. That's what this face says to me. Anyone who has that long of a pause before they say anything, they really want to pick their words carefully. He is the head of the RCMP here, but still.
I'm not going to comment on that, and other than the fact that we did receive the documents, and the investigation is ongoing, so I'll limit my comments to that.
He's looking down a lot. He's also tilting his head to the side a bit. He's got something to hide, but that is because he's an RCMP and he has to hide the data from us right now while he does the investigation. But this face to me screams there is a serious investigation here. It's not like someone submitted some documents. Oh, there's nothing here. No, there's definitely something there.
There is that we confirmed, Mark and I have confirmed in front of committee that there are investigations ongoing. So, wait, no.
Chinese police stations, one thing wasn't clear.
You can see he quickly moved on to, he looked over to the next person, the reporter here, and said, yeah, give me another question. We don't want to talk about that one.
Testimony. Are there currently Chinese police stations operating in Canada?
Are there currently Chinese police stations operating in Canada? I realize it's very quiet. I don't know why they don't give a microphone to the reporters asking questions. It'd be so much better.
I wasn't listening.
That again.
I wasn't listening. Just that's important though. So the fact that he just said that means he is thinking about the investigation, the documents he was, they were just given, the question he was just asked. He was thinking about it so much that he didn't even listen to the reporter's question. He moved on quickly, but then he was still going on in his mind. That says a lot without saying anything.
And falls into part of our ongoing investigation. I'm not speaking about it at this time.
But can you reassure Canadians and Chinese Canadians that there are none of them operating?
I can reassure Canadians and the Chinese community that the RCMP is actively investigating the matter, the topic, the nature of behavior, as well as a broad range of foreign interference activity in Canada from multiple countries.
It's crazy that there's Chinese police stations being operated here. Basically, they're using that as a way of having influence, mostly in the greater Vancouver area, because that's where all the Chinese residents are in Canada. Jumping back to the House, got Conservative here, which just absolutely goes off on the Liberals. This is crazy.
On the question of privilege and the violation of parliamentary privilege by the Liberal government in refusals to produce documents as it relates to the SDTC scandal. Now, we know, and I'll just do a quick recap for those that are just tuning in. We know that the government has taken the Sustainable Development Technology Canada and turned it into a green slush fund for Liberal insiders and friends. The Auditor General did a complete investigation on the governance of SDTC because the whistleblower had come forward. And she found over $390 million worth of contracts were given inappropriately by the board of directors, who all had multiple conflicts of interest. Now, SDTC is a Crown corporation. It's funded fully by the taxpayers of Canada, and every person that serves on that board of directors, including its CEO, is appointed by this government. The Liberal Minister of Industry individually appoints through order in council all of those directors. It should be noted, and as a former chair of the Environment Committee who worked closely with SDTC, that the committee, or that organization, had worked perfectly until 2017. In 2017, the former Minister of Industry, Navdeep Bains, who is no longer a member in this House, went and hired on with Rogers Corporation and making a pile of money doing that. He fired the existing chair and board of SDTC and loaded it up with Liberal friends and insiders, many of them who had already received grants through Sustainable Development Technology Canada. Now, when the Auditor General started doing her research, she found that there was $58 million. We're not talking pennies here. This makes ad scam look like nickel and dime stuff. This is $58 million were awarded on 10 ineligible projects. She found another $334 million on 186 cases of money that was given to projects in which the 9 board members actually had a conflict of interest and never recused themselves from the decision-making process. And that in $58 million worth of projects, almost $59 million worth of projects, that there was no contribution agreement or terms that were ever met. Now, the Auditor General made it clear that the failure of this is upon the Liberal Minister of Industry, who didn't follow through on his oversight and making sure that governance was followed. He turned a blind eye when they found out that they were actually handing out money to Liberal insiders. And we know that the Minister of the Environment was tied to Cycle Capital, one of the companies that was receiving grants from SDTC. And we know that there was actually a board member on that fund who was also with Cycle Capital, who said that his shares increased by 1,000% after receiving SDTC funding. 1,000%. And the Minister of Environment benefited as well. That is corruption.
I mean, we're seeing this with Mark Carney coming in, and then that money that put $2 billion going to the that satellite company that doing the Lightspeed, whatever. And the CEO is instantly making like $21 million off of that funding coming in. Like, these guys are all so corrupt, feeding each other contracts, making millions, scratch my back, scratch your back, whatever these guys are up to. It's disgusting.
At its core. We also know that yesterday, the RCMP opened up their investigation into the 9 directors identified by the Auditor General in the SDTC Green Slush Fund scandal. But should we at all be surprised by this, Mr. Speaker? You know, this is a Liberal government that has always been ethically challenged. It is scandal plagued, and the Liberals have a culture of corruption. And all I have to do is go back, and I mentioned ad scam from 2000 to 2004. I was elected in 2004. And we were dealing with the ad scam fallout back then. But we've witnessed it going on and on as we move forward. You know, let's not forget SNC-Lavalin scandal in 2019, where the Prime Minister put pressure on his Justice Minister at the time, Jody Wilson-Raybould, to approve contracts to and also provide a pardon to SNC-Lavalin so that they can tender on and bid on government contracts again. She said no, and the Prime Minister fired Jody Wilson-Raybould because she wouldn't follow his word. She did her job as the Attorney General of Canada in making sure that the law was respected and that these individuals weren't given a free pass for their fraudulent activities in other countries and here in Canada. We know.
What's interesting about that, it seems the Conservatives are not going down that route again, because Justin Trudeau and Liberals were able to circumnavigate that. Pierre has just decided to take these documents and send them directly to the RCMP, so the Liberals can't sweep this under the rug like they did with SNC-Lavalin.
Oh, that the Prime Minister was found in violation by the Ethics Commissioner for putting undue pressure on Jody Wilson-Raybould. And of course, that wasn't the first time that he had been found in violation of our ethics rules. It was only the second time, but he's the first Prime Minister in history to actually face an ethics scandal. We look back on the WE scandal of 2020, and here we had the Liberals, again, trying to shovel money into the hands of their friends at the WE charity, you know, over $500,000. Luckily, we were able to get that stopped. But we found out, again, Liberal insiders, including Bill Marneau, who the former Minister of Finance, was actually tied directly back to the WE charity. His daughter worked for the WE charity, and he was in there advocating not recusing himself from decision-making processes.
Who's now Bill No More.
You look at all the foreign interference that has taken place in the blind eye that has been given by these Liberals on what's happening here. The Arrive scam is another one that, again, we have, you know, millions and millions of dollars going in the pockets of 2 guys that we found out later that the Arrive Can app could have been set up for about $154 million. But no, we're talking $54 million plus that
$154,000. Anyone misspoke there.
That was used by these individuals to enrich themselves because they were tied directly to Liberal insiders. And let's not forget about the Winnipeg Lab documents in 2021. In 2020, it started. The House requested and ordered for the production of documents. The government stalled it and blocked it and even took the Speaker to court to try to stop the production of these documents that showed, when we did receive them finally this year, that the 2 scientists in question were actually operatives for the People's Liberation Army in Beijing. And that viruses were shipped to China, that intel on different vaccines were also shipped over to China. And who knows what other security breaches happened at the National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg. And the Liberals were too scared to let the public see it. And they were so scared in 2021 that instead of providing those documents and having everything come out through the Supreme Court, they called an election. And that, of course, broke Parliament, and the process stopped I think some of us over here would actually like these guys to, call an election now so that we can have an election that stops the documents coming forward if that's what the Liberals want to do. And Canadians can make the decision on how badly they want to put the Liberals in the penalty box based upon their continued unethical behavior and corruption that they plague their government.
That is one way to stop all of this. Just call an election. Basically, the Governor General will then dissolve Parliament. 36 days onwards, there'll be an election, and then Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives can investigate all this stuff and put all these guys in jail afterwards. I think we'd be fine with that. Who's in favor of that?
Now, I've mentioned that there's been ongoing ethical violations by this government as well. The Prime Minister was found to be guilty for taking a private vacation on Billionaire Island and using unsanctioned aircraft. We know that Bill Marneau was found in the WE scandal, had to resign over it. We know that the Public Safety Minister has been found guilty by the Ethics Commissioner on 2 different occasions, including awarding family members clam contracts in one of the Crown corporations. He was also found guilty of having his sister-in-law, I believe it was, made as the interim ethics commissioner. Like, how is there any unbiased there when they're family members? And
Justin Trudeau's mom, wasn't she hired on the We Charity as well? I believe she was making money from that.
We thank for interesting family gatherings like Christmas supper. And we also got the trade minister who went and gave her BFF, her campaign manager, contracts directly out of her department, out of her office, without tendering them out at all. And she was found in violation of the ethics rules. And now we have the Liberals obstructing our parliamentary process. They are also obstructing justice. Will they turn these documents over to the RCMP? I doubt it. They're going to claim some sort of cabinet secrecy. But, we have to make sure that the rules of this place, our parliamentary procedure, our Constitution, our Charter, even the British North America Act, is respected. And that's the last thing that these Liberals are doing, Mr. Speaker. Now, they keep claiming, well, this is all about charter rights. And I'll just repeat what the leader of the Conservative Party said yesterday. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms is designed to protect the people from the government, not provide a cover for the government to hide documents from the people. And we have to recognize that the supremacy of our democratic institution, the Parliament of Canada, is the overall legislative body that writes the rules, that writes the laws, and directs our justice system, not the other way around. And the Liberals are always trying to tilt that discussion. So I just want to say this, that if you look at the rules, Standing Order 108(1)A, which gives the power to the House of Commons, to committees, to Parliament, to order the production of papers. And it, just to reiterate it right out of here, the House of Commons Procedures and Practice, 3rd edition, it says the only limitations which could only be self-imposed would be that an inquiry should relate to the subject within the legislative competence of Parliament, particularly where witnesses and documents are required and the penal jurisdiction of Parliament is contemplated. This dovetails with the right of each House of Parliament to summon and compel the attendance of all persons within the limits of their jurisdiction. It goes on to say, the power to send for persons, papers, and records has been delegated by the House of Commons to its committees in the standing orders. It is well established that Parliament has the right to order any and all documents to be laid before it which it believes are necessary for its information. The power to call for persons, papers, and records is absolute. It's absolute. And the Liberals here continue to avoid, dither, delay, deflect, rather than comply with an order of the House. And then we know, Mr. Speaker, based upon the Speaker's decision, when he came to the conclusion that this is a prima facie question of privilege that has been established, and that's what we're in here debating today and have been all week. Because in it, he said, the procedural precedents and authorities are abundantly clear. The House has the undoubted right to order the production of any and all documents from any entity or individual it deems necessary to carry out its duties. And here we have a majority of duly elected honorable members from across the country that are calling on the government to deliver. And I wonder if we're going to see the Liberals go and try to block this process again, either by taking the Speaker back to court because they do not respect Parliament, or are they going to prorogue and stop all processes again? Possibly. That's something that we're all wondering about. Or if they really think that this should be something that the people of Canada should have a say on, let's call an election. And then we can talk about things like the carbon tax and how it's impacting and hurting Canadians from coast to coast to coast.
This is, something really important here. So it's not just the Conservatives saying, hey, we want these documents. It was everyone, basically, most people, aside from the Liberals, NDP, the Greens, the Bloc, all wanting to see the documents and, hand them over. And the Liberals won't. So the Liberals are committing a crime here in our government. They know they're stuck because if they give them over, obviously there's something in there they don't want all of us to see. So we've got a bunch of criminals running our country right now. That is the state we're in right now. Now, a good thing is the RCMP are investigating. They're starting at the tip of the snake, so they have to work their way in. How long will this take? I don't know. I mean, they could prorogue the government and just wipe it clean, but then they'd have to face confidence motion coming back. It's hard to say what's going to happen here.
We can talk about how their out-of-control policies and hug-a-thug have created crime and chaos on our streets, the worst that we've ever seen. We can talk about how the housing crisis is making it impossible for young Canadians to achieve the Canadian dream of owning their own home.
In BC here, David Eby just announced a new program where they're basically, they'll take on, I think, 40% of a first-time homebuyer's mortgage as basically a second mortgage. And because first-time homebuyers can't get a big enough mortgage from the banks now, they can't buy any houses. It's just too expensive. So say if you had $1 million house, which would be crazy as a first-time homebuyer, but just say for easy math, that means they'd have to get a mortgage for $600,000 from RBC or Scotiabank or whatever, and then the government would cover 40%. I believe that's how the program works. They just announced it, but basically you just have two mortgages, one backed by the government and one backed by RBC. And if you sold your house, then that value would be taken, the 40% would be taken off of the sale of the house. And so, I mean, just as a normal mortgage would be if it's cleared off of RBC or whatever lending institute. These are really sad measures that have to be made just so people can afford. You have to get two mortgages, one from a financial institute and one from the government just to be able to buy a house. Like, that's not what you want to be getting into. You're better off to move to another country, go rural and have a remote job or do van life or something like that. Buy a piece of land remote somewhere, build an off-grid cabin versus buying some $1 million tiny box in a city where, things are just getting worse. Crime's getting worse and life is just becoming way too expensive.
And we can talk about how the reckless spending is breaking our country, driving up inflation and hurting employment right across this country. Never mind productivity is on the downturn, that we are now making 50% less, or the Americans are making 50% more than we are. That to me is troubling, to say the least, because when they came to power, the financial situation in this country was strong. Canadians were making more money in the middle class than what Americans were, and now we have fallen so far back because of the uncreative and negating policies that have hurt Canadians all over our country. This all came to light because of a whistleblower who's been at committee, and I just want to read some of their quotes. First of all, the true failure of the situation stands at the feet of our current government, whose decision to protect wrongdoers and cover up their findings over the last 12 months is a serious indictment of how our democratic systems and institutions are being corrupted by political interference. By the Liberals themselves, Mr. Speaker, and we hear it here all the time, that they are not at all trying to comply with the Auditor General report or what the Industry Committee has said. They have not tried to comply with this order to produce the papers that are so necessary in getting down to the bottom of what happened here and how their friends and liberal insiders are getting rich while the rest of us continue to get poorer. Goes on to say, I think the current government is more interested in protecting themselves and protecting the situation being a public nightmare, and they'd rather protect their wrongdoers and financial mismanagement than have to deal with a situation like this SDTC and the public sphere. The whistleblower goes on, I know the federal government, like the minister, has continued saying there was no criminal intent and nothing was found, but I think the committee would agree that they're not to be trusted on this situation. I would happily agree to whatever the findings are by the RCMP, but I would say that I wouldn't trust that there isn't any criminality unless the RCMP is given full authority to investigate. And as we know now, the RCMP is going to do their job and going to get down to the bottom of this. They decide to enrich themselves. They decide to help their own companies and grant themselves their own government funds, which is a complete violation and criminality of proper governance. And the Minister of Industry decided to willfully turn a blind eye, and the Liberals have been trying to cover this up ever since. So, Madam Speaker, I don't think any of us are surprised that we're here again, having to try to convince the government to come clean, to produce the documents, allow Parliament to do its work that it's elected to do, and for them to be held to account. Anything else that we're seeing here is simply called a cover-up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. And what is very, very clear is that for the Conservative Party of Canada, this is nothing but a game. And that is the truth. You know, even if you listen to what the member opposite is saying, you know, his virtual at his conclusions, he says, well, let's just call the election. And then he went with the 4 slogans or the 4 bumper stickers. Madam Speaker, the issue here before us is to allow it to go to Procedure and House Affairs Committee. Instead of that, the Conservatives want to filibuster it.
The Liberals want to keep control of this. They don't want to go to the RCMP because they don't have control over there. You know, every time they got this little goblin commander here, he's such a bad face for this too, because he's so grumpy and he's so arrogant and pompous, smug little gremlin. For an issue that's so sensitive, they probably would have been better off having someone with a little more tact replying to these concerns.
The issue in terms of the content is if we ignore what the RCMP and the Auditor General have said, that they are highly concerned about the tactic that the Conservative Party is using, Madam Speaker, then I could understand why it is that they would be pushing for it. There is no justification. Let the Standing Committee deal with it. Why play the game? The people that are paying the price of this Conservative game is Canadians.
So there we have it. This SDTC scandal is really blown open wide here. We got the cops involved, RCMP. We're at a point now where it's a matter of, is it days? It's more likely weeks before the hammer drops, the corruption gets fully exposed, and some, maybe many of these dirty Liberals will go to jail.